Imagine this. A sunny afternoon, the smell of chlorine in the air, kids splashing around in the pool, and then, out of nowhere, a woman tells my sister she can't swim just because of the color of her skin. Yes, you heard that right. This Karen, who seemed to think she had all the power in the world, told my sister she couldn't use the pool because she was too brown. The audacity. And here's the twist. My sister isn't just any regular person. She's a civil rights lawyer, someone who has fought against injustice her whole life. But even that didn't seem to matter to this woman. What followed next was a battle of words, one that shook me to my core. As my sister stood there, calmly trying to explain her rights, I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. How could someone still think this way in today's world? The tension in the air was thick, and I could feel my heart racing. It was clear this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was something deeper. But the real question is, how would we handle this? Would my sister stand her ground, or would this encounter take an even darker turn? Stay tuned to find out what happened next. At first, I thought maybe this woman was just having a bad day. But the more I watched, the more it became clear. This wasn't about a simple misunderstanding. It was about something much uglier. My sister, calm and composed as always, tried to explain that we were all guests at the community pool and that everyone had a right to use it. But Karen wasn't listening. She kept repeating the same thing, saying my sister was too dark to swim in that pool. I was stunned. I've heard stories, read about things like this in the news, but never did I think I'd be standing right there witnessing it firsthand. My sister, who has spent her whole life fighting for civil rights, trying to make the world a more just place, was now the one facing this kind of discrimination. What made it worse was the crowd around us. A few people were looking on, but most were either too afraid to speak up or simply didn't care enough to get involved. That silence was almost more deafening than the words coming out of Karen's mouth. I could feel my sister's frustration building, but she stayed calm, refusing to give in to anger. But something was about to change. The tension was rising, and we weren't backing down. What would Karen do next? As the seconds ticked by, the atmosphere around the pool grew heavier. My sister's voice was steady, but there was a fire in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. I could tell she was weighing her options. Should she escalate things, or keep her cool for now? But Karen wasn't going to make it easy. She crossed her arms, looking my sister up and down with a look of pure contempt, like she was somehow superior. "Maybe you should take your rights somewhere else," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "This pool's for people who don't look like you." I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I knew my sister would want me to stay out of it, to let her handle things. She had this way of staying calm under pressure, always thinking 2 steps ahead. But there was something about Karen's words, the way she was using her privilege like a weapon, that made me want to jump in. The other people by the pool were starting to notice now, some of them glancing at us, unsure of what to do. A couple of them were whispering to each other, probably debating whether or not to step in. There was a man with his kid nearby, watching the whole scene unfold. His expression was a mix of confusion and discomfort, and I could almost see the wheels turning in his head. Should he intervene? Should anyone? Then, out of nowhere, Karen shouted, "If you don't leave, I'll call the cops." That threat hung in the air, like a weight I couldn't shake off. It wasn't just the fear of a confrontation with the police. It was the reality that someone like my sister, someone who fought for justice every day, could still be treated like this. My sister's face tightened. This wasn't just an attack on her. It was an attack on everything she stood for. The crowd fell silent, and I could feel all eyes on us now. Would we leave? Would we fight back? And what would it cost? The air around us felt like it was thickening with every word Karen spoke. My sister took a slow, deep breath, her eyes locked on Karen's with unwavering determination. I could tell she wasn't scared, but this wasn't just about standing up for herself anymore. It felt like a defining moment, a test of everything my sister had worked for in her career as a civil rights lawyer. This wasn't just an argument. This was a battle, and Karen had just thrown down the gauntlet by threatening the police. Go ahead, my sister said, her voice low but sharp. Call the cops. Let them hear how you're denying me access to a public pool based on the color of my skin. It was like she was daring Karen to take the next step, to show the world just how deep her prejudice ran. The words hung in the air, and for a split second, everything went quiet. The other poolgoers had stopped their chatter, now fully focused on the confrontation. You could see some people shifting uncomfortably, glancing between Karen and my sister, clearly unsure of what to do. I could see the tension in Karen's face as she hesitated. It was as if she realized, for the first time, that her position was crumbling. She was caught between holding onto her misguided authority or backing down and admitting she was wrong. But she wasn't ready to give up. Her hand shot out to grab her phone, but something was different now. The entire situation felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Then, just as Karen started dialing, a voice interrupted the silence. It was a woman from the other side of the pool who had been watching this unfold. "Are you seriously going to call the cops over this?" she called out. The words were soft, but the challenge in them was enough to make Karen stop mid-dial. I could see Karen's face tighten, the controls slipping from her grasp. For a moment, I thought maybe the crowd would step in, that the weight of collective judgment would finally break the tension. But Karen was still holding onto her phone, her finger hovering over the screen, torn between making the call or backing down. In that moment, everything hung in the balance. Would the crowd finally speak up? Would Karen back off? Or would my sister be forced to face the consequences of standing up for what was right? The air was thick with anticipation. Just as the crowd was beginning to stir, and I thought Karen might finally back down, a new voice cut through the tension. It wasn't the woman from the poolside, it was the lifeguard. He'd been watching the situation from his post at the edge of the pool, and now he stepped down from his elevated chair, walking toward us with an expression that I couldn't quite read. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone flat, almost indifferent. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't stepping in to help, but to assert some kind of authority. I froze, not sure what he was going to do next. The lifeguard had the power to enforce the pool's rules, but he also had the ability to stop Karen from escalating things further. My sister's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, I saw a brief flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. Was he going to back Karen up? Karen, sensing an opportunity, quickly pounced. "Yes," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This woman is being aggressive. I want her removed from the pool immediately." My sister didn't flinch, but I could feel the change in the air. The lifeguard paused, glancing at Karen, then at my sister, sizing up the situation. His eyes narrowed for a moment, and I could see the internal battle waging within him. Should he do what was right, or should he take the easy way out and side with Karen? It was like everything was happening in slow motion. The lifeguard stood there, hesitating, as the tension in the crowd grew even thicker. Some of the people who had been silent up until now were starting to murmur, unsure of where things were headed, but no one dared to speak up directly, as if waiting for someone else to make the first move. Then, just as I thought we might get some justice, a man who had been sitting by the pool with his wife suddenly stood up. He had been watching the scene closely, and I could tell from the way he was staring that he wasn't happy with how things were unfolding. He walked toward the lifeguard, his face tight with frustration. "This is ridiculous," the man said, his voice strong. "You're really going to let her get away with this? Are you going to let her discriminate like that in front of everyone?" The lifeguard's face reddened slightly, clearly caught off guard. Karen shot a look of panic toward the man, but the tension in the air only grew heavier. This new voice, someone completely unrelated to the situation, was suddenly shifting the dynamics, and it was clear that everyone was now waiting to see what would happen next. Would the lifeguard do the right thing, or would he side with the discrimination that had started it all? Just when I thought things couldn't get more intense, I saw the woman who had spoken up earlier step forward again, this time with her phone in hand. She was recording. "I'm filming this," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. If this doesn't get resolved, I'll be posting it online. The weight of the situation was now clear to everyone. The lifeguard couldn't pretend he didn't see what was going on. Karen's grip on the phone was tight, her face flushed, but now, it wasn't just about the two of them anymore. The entire poolside was watching. The stakes were higher than ever, and I could feel the world holding its breath. The lifeguard's face was now a mask of uncertainty. He glanced between Karen, my sister, and the growing crowd, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. For a moment, it seemed like the world was on pause, as if everyone was waiting for him to make the decision that would either diffuse the conflict or escalate it even further. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lifeguard spoke up. "Ma'am, I don't see any reason to remove her. The pool is open to everyone." A wave of relief washed over me, but I knew we weren't out of the woods just yet. Karen's face turned bright red, her grip tightening on her phone. She looked like she was about to explode, but the crowd was now watching her every move. Her plan to get my sister removed was falling apart in front of her eyes. Just as Karen opened her mouth, probably ready to argue or cause another scene, the man who had spoken up earlier stepped forward once more. "You can't just deny someone their rights like that. You're in the wrong," he said firmly, addressing Karen. The crowd seemed to nod in agreement, sensing the tide was turning. For a moment, it seemed like the drama was over, and we were about to leave this situation behind. But then, just when we thought things were settling, something unexpected happened. A police car pulled up by the entrance, the siren blaring briefly before it stopped. My heart skipped a beat. Had Karen actually called the cops? Was this whole thing about to spiral out of control again? The officer got out of the car, a young woman who appeared calm and collected. She glanced at the scene, assessing the situation. Karen immediately rushed over, still holding her phone. "Officer, thank God. These people are causing a scene and refusing to leave." The officer looked at Karen for a long moment, then turned to my sister and the rest of us. The silence stretched on as everyone awaited her decision. To our surprise, the officer didn't react the way we thought she would. She nodded slowly, but instead of siding with Karen, she turned to the crowd and said, "I've seen enough." With a sharp motion, she raised her hand, signaling the crowd to quiet down. "I've been informed of the situation, and I'm here to make one thing clear," the officer said, her voice authoritative but calm. "Everyone here deserves to be treated with respect. If there's any further attempt to harass or discriminate, I will take action. Is that understood?" The lifeguard nodded, and even Karen seemed to shrink back, realizing her plan was crumbling faster than she could react. My sister didn't move, standing tall and proud, her eyes never leaving the officer. And then, just as the tension seemed to break, the officer did something no one expected. She looked directly at Karen and added, "And just so you know, ma'am, you're being recorded. Your actions are on video. It would be wise to rethink how you handle this." The officer's calmness and authority had shifted the entire energy. Karen, who had been holding on to her power so tightly, now seemed to deflate, her bravado slipping away. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and I saw the moment of defeat in Karen's eyes. She had no ground left to stand on. But the final twist came when the officer turned to us and said, "You're free to stay. Enjoy your day." As the crowd slowly began to disperse, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice, but the real surprise came later, when the man who had spoken up approached us, his expression softening. "I just wanted to say," he started, his voice quieter now, "thank you. For standing up, for not backing down. It's rare to see that kind of courage. If you ever need legal help, I know some people in the field." My sister smiled, grateful for the unexpected support, but as we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment had just shifted something inside me too. The battle wasn't over, but today, in that pool, we had won.